This review exists by accident. A couple of years ago I was trying to find Siberia, but I couldn't remember the name for the life of me and ended up going through adventure games on GOG. The promotional material looked pretty similar and it was only a couple of quid, so I wasn't too arsed when I eventually realised I had the wrong game. But the box art stuck in my mind, and looking over the screenshots it seemed like the kind of thing I'd be into. Funnily enough, the tone that this cover art is going for doesn't reflect in the game at all really. It's in a wildly different tone to most of the actual game. I'm not typically an adventure game player either, because the honest truth is that I'm not very good at them. But if one has a specific tone or interesting narrative, I'll still force my way through it on that merit. Plus, it's not like there's a skill ceiling to enjoy the story of an adventure game. If the puzzles are too much, then the chances are that someone somewhere has probably written a guide or made a long play to bypass the more obtuse ones. I don't normally play many adventure games though, because I am the dumbest person I know. I am the standard by which all idiocy is judged. I can't take full credit for this because, famously, a large percentage of adventure game puzzles are put together with logic that flies right past esoteric and enters the realm of actively hostile. Add to that the fact that my ability to solve puzzles doesn't even have me on equal footing with most lab animals. Then you can understand why I haven't played a lot of them. I always default to heavy use of the walkthrough to the point of making it into an interactive book. Which I don't mind, honestly. Some might say that I'm cheating myself out of the game by doing this, which is up to interpretation, but probably correct. But I do feel like that's put me at a disadvantage for reviewing them. If I tell you a puzzle was hard, chances are that it probably wasn't, I just have an allergy to logic. But The Longest Journey is one of those games like Light and Darkness where the bizarreness of it is the attraction. I have a weird ability to stay interested in a game so long as it keeps giving me surreal art to look at. Thankfully this game is vastly less dickish than that game, but there's still a fair amount of moon logic to be found. Released in 1999 in its native country of Norway, and later released globally nearly a year later, The Longest Journey is a very 90s game in the way that it's a champion of the somewhat forgotten, but never really dead no matter how hard YA fiction tries to kill it, genre of urban fantasy. Although maybe not that, since this game technically takes place about 200 years in the future, so it's like a light urban fantasy where the urban part is Blade Runner, but the beats still stay the same. There's a mundane reality that intersects with a fantastical otherworld, and occasionally the two overlap. But where a lot of urban fantasy draws its influence from pre-existing lore, like vampires or... well, to be honest, vampires kind of had urban fantasy on lock for a while, but there are other examples of things that are not that. This game is fully original with the added benefit, or maybe symptom is a better word, of Nordic folklore influences. For context, a lot of Nordic folklore is like meeting a funny little gnome in an enchanted wood, and then having him pull a knife on you. That might go a ways to explaining the completely fucked tone of the game. This is a game where you have a comic relief talking bird and you smoke a peace pipe with the tribe of Norwegian Ewoks, but then you run around crack dens and listen to local history about police-led massacres and social injustice.
From what I've been told, the clock stopped on the very day of the infamous Venice massacre in 2109, to the minute the police opened fire on the squatters.
You fight an evil alchemist via hopscotch and go to fantasy taverns, but then the pub owner casually mentions that she owns slaves. You do a fairy tale quest to stop a giant from snoring and make friends with the woodland twigmen, but then you hear the game's dialogue.
Jesus H. Christ, you think that fuck off would be clear enough as it is for even a slag like you to understand?
I'm not a slag!
For now, all you need to know is that the game has two settings. One is the future Earth, where you jack in and fight the space church, and the other is a fantasy world where you talk to rejected Dark Crystal character designs. These two worlds are in danger of merging and causing trouble, so since you can travel between them, you're gonna try and stop it. I started doing a structure, I guess the last time I did an adventure game where, because the gameplay is so linked to the story, you can't really remove it. And since most point-and-click games don't really alter the format all that much, the review is more of a run-through of the narrative while we stop off to talk about things, like a road trip. But just so you know, I will be spoiling nearly everything in the game, so bear that in mind if halfway through you think you might actually fancy playing the game yourself.
Convenient, but disturbing.
The Longest Journey was developed by Funcom, a company better known now for its MMOs, but in 1999 they were mostly producing ports and tie-ins. Oddly enough, an MMO related to The Longest Journey would eventually be planned, but nothing ever came of it. But that didn't stop the series receiving 2 sequels. The game was also released on iOS as part of that weird portion of the latter half of the 2010s where classic games were getting iOS ports for batshit prices. The support for that sadly died out, along with a lot of games following the update to iOS 11, so that version is now abandoned, though I wouldn't really recommend playing it like that anyway. Oddly enough, I first played Beneath a Steel Sky this way.
It's wheezing and banging. like an asthmatic dinosaur in the mating season.
This game did well. It might be cult now, but at the time this was one of, if not the best-selling game made by a Norwegian company. Admittedly, Norway's games industry was still small at the time, but that didn't stop the game selling well overseas. In addition to an initial reported 15,000 copies sold in its home country, it was probably more by the mid-2000s, but articles on the sales figures that I could find only referenced the dates around the release. But those initial 15,000 copies was before a global release. The game never got a remaster though, and while the PC version will work, you'll have to do a bit of messing around to get it to play nice with modern systems. There is a fan-made remaster as well, but it uses AI textures to upscale the graphics, which I'm not a fan of. While I'm sure this works well, I've never played the game before, so I don't know what it's messing up. And I like to experience the game as close to original as I can. Though granted I have added anti-aliasing, but that's not adding anything, it's just cranking up what's already there. There's also the fact that I like my FMVs and pre-rendered backgrounds crunchy. I'll fully admit to playing games like this for the sole reason of staring at that background art. I love this stuff. The game initially won't be able to find its own files either, and following methods to update the path doesn't work for me. Thankfully you can just download Scum VM and run the game through there, and now it works perfectly. Plus you get to fiddle with a few more options this way. Unfortunately we now have another issue: audio popping. I was able to fix this essentially by accident, but how reproducible this is will depend on what you have. Ultimately, I fixed it by changing this value to 0 in the game's preferences INI file, and raising my sample rate in my audio interface's control software. I have no clue whether changing that value did anything, it was just something I found while searching for issues. Doing this may lead to your audio devices having a fit and causing problems outside of the game, so I can't really recommend it. My approach to fixing shit has always been to twist dials and push buttons until something either breaks, or we solve the problem by creating about 12 new ones. But with ScumVM working, the game should at least be running.
What an asshole.
We begin with a bookend. If you've seen bookends like this before, you'll probably be able to work out the twist of this scene pretty quick, but otherwise we begin with an old woman telling a story to two children. I'm not really sure. The way they talk and the way the old woman talks to them implies that they are, but they're clearly the size of an adult, and one of them has a fucking beard, so I don't really know. She's making a lot of references to things we don't know about yet, but that's all part of setting up the mystery, I get that. Be prepared to be assaulted with fantasy jargon from the outset, though. This game is a victim of what I'm calling the Tolkien effect, where every fantasy writer feels the need to try and cram 3 books worth of background lore they wrote into every bit of dialogue. So for now, let's just collect keywords and put them in a box. The first one being balance. You'll hear that a lot. We technically get 3 false starts here because we get the old woman, then we get a pre-rendered cutscene where Dr. Manhattan is walking around the tower with his knob out, and some kind of seal breaks before we cut to black, and then cut to the future where we actually start inside of the main character's dream.
Oh no. Don't tell me I'm dreaming again. You know, for once, just once, it would be nice to have a decent night's sleep without waking up screaming from a bad dream at 4 a.m.
She's called April, and like a lot of 90s protagonists, she has a pathological need to turn everything into dry observational comedy, even when they aren't funny or appropriate to the situation. It's annoying, but a byproduct of its time. I'll come back to this, but right now it's worth mentioning that the beginning puzzle is one of the few puzzles I didn't actually have trouble with. This game is not hard, let me reiterate that. The reviews I've read and the testimony of the time calls this one of the easier point-and-click games out there. I mention this purely with the intention of solidifying just how fucking dumb I am. The whole puzzle is dream logic where you have to save an egg from the edge of a cliff. There's a stream with some water you can divert, but to do that you'll need something to use as a funnel, so you snap off this twig here.
Oh, the suffering we must endure.
It's obvious that something happened to divert the water, but the tree is a little vague about it. This sets precedent for how the game likes to run its exposition. You'll typically meet a character, that character will wax poetic about fantasy jargon for a solid few minutes, and you'll leave with more questions than you went in with. The best approach is to just let it happen, and then we'll try and form the chicken scratch notes I took into something approaching an overarching plot later. But for the record, we don't come back here until the end of the game.
I think I just made a funnel. Cool! I'm so proud of myself.
For fuck's sake, you save an egg, and you get more exposition from an eldritch dragon thing, but then you get attacked by what looks like a late 90s physics demo and wake up in the future. This is Newport, the game's future urban setting. We get another world to add onto that later, which we already saw a little bit of in the opening, but I'm still not entirely sure that what's happening in the opening was actually literal, since it's referenced to as a dream, but not like a dream. Also, you don't really dream, you teleport, but somehow dreams are also important. Look, there are elements of it that I can't explain that imply that it's not, so I'm not really sure. What I will say is that Newport looks great. It's in a style that I can't say I've seen much of outside of maybe Final Fantasy VIII. I don't know if there's an official name for it, but I guess I'd call it Future Renaissance. Like all the architecture has these flowing lines and white marble and decorative reliefs, but it's also partly brutalist futurist, partly grimy urban decay, part nautical Jules Verne shit. It looks like Balam Garden if it had a crime rate. If you leave your room, you'll immediately get cornered by your creepy neighbour that tries the nice guy tactic of offering you a date you don't want and then calling you a bitch for politely saying no.
You'll come crawling back when you realize your mistake, babe. I'm out of here.
You can also talk to your landlord, and here's another point for the game. This game came out in '99 and has gay characters that are handled well. It's never played for jokes and feels genuine. No one's a stereotype, and the presence of it is never treated as unusual. That's quite rare for mainstream 90s media, generally, let alone a video game. The sovereign state of the gamer bro was in full force, whose bedroom must hangs in an advection fog of stale sweat and even staler semen. The scalloped and dog-eared Xena poster standing vanguard above a Quake 3 session, the typing of the same three-letter word now a practiced hair trigger, as he calls Noob Razor 84 a f*** in the chat window.
I always did love a man in a uniform.
Sorry, man, but I'm gay. Now, move along.
Your landlord and her girlfriend are actually two of my favourite characters. They give off that same energy of a nice couple you'd get talking to in a pub when that rare social phenomenon occurs, where somehow you merge the group you're with onto a table with people you've never met before, and you're just at that right amount of tipsy to be socially lubricated without it feeling like drunken rambling. You can ask Fiona a ludicrous amount of shit, by the way. This is true for most of the characters in the game, honestly. This game has a lot of extraneous dialogue, which probably accounts for the fact that the game came on 4 CDs. That's not always a good thing, mind you. While it works here because you get a nice overview of the setting through talking to Fiona, there are sections later in the game where you will have to sit through so much exposition that the import of whatever is being said gets lost under a mountain of dialogue. If you leave the apartment, you can talk with the man outside on a park bench that gives you prophetic advice about your destiny, but admittedly where I live that's not that unusual.
How many cigarettes have you got, lad?
This is Venice, and I love it. This is a prime cut of some pre-rendered background steak. The place is so named as it's a mess of canals and Italian architecture meant to emulate the real Venice, which, given that this game takes place several hundred years in the future, the real Venice might not actually exist anymore. The whole place is this really interesting mix of Venetian architecture crossed with some 19th century industrial influences, and topped off with a sci-fi flavouring and a patina of rust. If you've ever been to a city that used to be an industrial powerhouse in the late 1800s, but has since been converted into hipster bars and nice apartments I can't afford, this looks a little bit like that. We can't go to work because it's closed, but we can go to the university that April is a student at so we can dig through the bins for marigolds. There's books about Turner on the shelf. I don't know anything about painting, but I know that is a painter. April's an art student, and apparently in the far future the hot new art form is hollow sculpture, which I guess is either just 3D modelling turned into a hologram, or maybe you have to actually work the machine like Minority Report to sculpt things. I'm not really sure, and we never actually see anyone use one, so who knows. April just sticks to painting. You do a bit of work, but then you get a message from your friend telling you that the park bench guy from earlier is looking for you. So you drop out of work a few days away from your deadline to go on a side quest, which is extremely accurate to a lot of people's academic experience. When you're that close to a deadline, anything other than finishing what you should be working on starts to look like the most interesting shit in the world. We get to go to the cafe where April works, and now's a good time to talk about the music. The game has an interesting mix of world instruments and orchestral pieces, and it's all very grand and sweeping, which makes sense for a game that's trying to sell its scale. I mean, you don't call your game The Longest Journey and not have your character get around a bit. So as far as fantasy game adventures go, I'd say it's pretty fitting. It's worth mentioning the vast majority of the game doesn't use music and instead sticks to ambience, which is absolutely welcome. Video games have always struggled with the fact that even the most tightly composed masterpiece can get on your tits when you have to listen to it 100 times looped in the background, and adventure games suffer the most from it. You spend a lot of time wandering back and forth through the same areas trying to solve puzzles, and if you're anything like me, you can take upwards to 3 hours to solve even one, if you don't just give up and use the walkthrough, which I usually do. Not that we don't get those annoying repetitious tracks, though. There are a couple in the game still, but otherwise good music. I fucking love the jukebox in the cafe later, though. It's queued up with several decent trip-hop songs, and it's extremely my shit. Cortez did tell you where to meet, but it gives it you in code. So you have to grill your friends for info to find out that Cortez likely wants to meet you at an art gallery with an exhibit on children's artwork. So we have a location now, but good god, take the fucking sweet wrapper and eat one. This is integral to a puzzle later, and it's the first adventure game sin that we can add to the board. Having hidden in plain sight solutions to puzzles you didn't know will appear for at least a good few hours. The game likes doing this too, so keep an eye out. You should also argue with your boss to get paid because you'll be needing money and he offers you a shift, which can lead to a branching path later. The game has a couple of these moments where you'll get different encounters based on what you choose to do, but neither really has any lasting effect. They just give you a couple of different scenes. You have to take the metro to get to Cortez, but given that this is the corporate-run nightmare future that at this point is uncomfortably plausible in reality, the turnstiles have anti-pause scanners to stop you using public transport if you're broke. And it's not just scanning your debit card either, it scans your genetic information that's linked to your bank account, which is a depressing thought. This kind of stuff is drip-fed to you because back at your apartment earlier you have this weirdly Douglas Adams type interaction with the terminal in the hallway.
This terminal doesn't belong to me.
Noted. Please refrain from voice communication in the future, or you will be reported to the FACT FUB and charged for processing time.
FUB?
Fair Use Bureau. They are authorized to carry deadly arms.
We don't immediately get the cyberpunk dystopia, just little bits here and there like the monument to the massacre earlier and the fact that you can be arrested at gunpoint for skateboarding. Then later we see a whole upper city level like Midgar locked off by armed police and scanners that won't let you in unless you're rich enough, and space labour colonies like in Red Faction. The exhibition that Cortez is at is a collection of work that seems kind of advanced for children's art. Not that there aren't talented kids that can do stuff like this, and I'm an adult that struggles with stick figures so I can't talk, but still. You have to play art critic with Cortez and try and extrapolate meaning out of this painting, and I like this scene. It's a nice quiet character moment where the two argue about the philosophy of art and whether the real art is the physical object or the interpretation of the work. I get the sense that it's the game's director waxing poetical for a bit, but it's a nice scene. It's a little messy narratively though. If you squint, you can kind of interpret the truth and illusions message as a reflection of the fact that April spends the whole game switching between the human world and a fantasy world, but given that the two worlds existing side by side are quite literal in the game, they both physically exist, I don't really see how this fits that theme, but yeah. Initially you access the other world through dreams, but later on I felt that it was stated that these aren't dreams, you're actually shifting worlds in your sleep subconsciously. Yes, there is a fantasy world, but in the context of the game it's a real fantasy world existing parallel to the one April's in. Like how April quotes Freud earlier.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, not a banana.
Cortez nearly gives you the information about what your dreams mean, but stops short of actually telling you anything and asks you to meet him tomorrow, which will become a running theme for Cortez. No one ever wants to give you the information up front, and I can never tell if it's the game stalling for time to fit the pieces in, or if the game genuinely thinks this is a good narrative device to build up mystery, which... no, it isn't, it's just Prometheus again. For now, you're free to kill time. Well, technically no, you could use this time to run around and grab objects you didn't see on the way, but at certain points the game will just tuck its hands into its jumper pockets and rest its eyes waiting for you to go to sleep to start the next chapter. Depending on the dialogue options you picked, you'll either go to work at the cafe or you'll go home and watch TV, and both have your first crossover with the other world of Arcadia. If you refuse the shift and go home, reality will break while you're watching TV and for a few seconds the room turns into a forest. If you take the shift, honestly, I'm just gonna let what happens if you take the shift play out, because it's really funny. When you talk to your landlord, she's understandably disturbed about having had her perception of reality challenged. What's strange though is the fact that she says she's been having weird experiences previously to this, as has your friend, so this isn't just a local phenomenon. Which isn't odd, but what is odd is that at no point in the game do we get any indication that this is having a collective impact on the wider world. You'd think holes in reality would eventually make the news, but outside of these two, you'd assume nothing was off. What I thought after this was that maybe this is just a local issue affecting people in the immediate area around April, but spoilers for a chapter or so ahead, two planets are essentially smashing their realities into each other, and that's what's causing this. So I feel like an event like that wouldn't just be contained to one woman and all the people she knows. Plus, other people in the bar see the creature, so April can't know everyone in there, surely. You have bigger problems than that though. We need to find Cortez again, and because he's a hipster we learn that he's probably watching Bergman films and chain smoking at a revival cinema. Because he's evolved past having a movie subscription like a stage 1 hipster. Christ, when we meet him he's already gone past stage 5, reading obscure literature on park benches and glancing around to see if anyone is noticing. And maybe tilting the book a little so people can see the weather-beaten cover and know that it's been bought from an obscure second-hand bookshop. The problem is that no one knows where this cinema is except the incel upstairs. You have to goad him into a date, and if it wasn't clear how much of a cunt this guy is, the first thing he asks is if you're gonna shag him.
And, are you gonna put out?
What?
I mean, if I'm gonna use my VIP passes and my pills, babe, I just gotta know if it'll be worth it or not.
This game has a lot of characters that don't fully land, but they succeeded with Zack with making you want to see him fall down a flight of stairs. Maybe 2. Concrete ones. This is the first time we get to go to Metro Circle, and damn is this background nice. We've still got the weird neo-Renaissance bridge, but now it's straddled by strip clubs and rundown bars, and we get more Blade Runner added to the mix. It also makes me confused as to how this whole city works, because we started in Venice, which is about as close to ground level as you can get from the looks of things, but we never see this giant structure in the distance. Venice is all bright sunshine and open skies, at least as far as cities go, but it's apparently in the shadow of this massive globe structure and an upper plate. I don't mind it all that much, I'm an advocate for the rule of cool, but this is still surreal. Like, if it's a fantasy world with flying castles and underwater cities, I wouldn't question it. But because this is trying to look like a city, I think your brain picks up reference points and it starts to strum on that surrealist neuron a little bit. We get flying castles and underwater cities later, but that's in Arcadia. There is a lift to the upper level here, but you're not getting there yet. We can talk to the guard though and get 2 wildly different styles of writing in one interaction. Initially there's this sort of dry humour dig at the fact that police is now privately owned by mega corporations, and we basically get the same social commentary as RoboCop. I mean, the dude is a cyborg cop, so, you know. But then the style switches for the end punchline to something approaching a Douglas Adams joke. But keep this in mind because it's the first rumblings of the game trying to balance at least 4 different tones and writing styles at the same time. And the end result ends up being the equivalent of trying to watch a pretty serious film that keeps taking breaks to do stand-up. It's not integrated very subtly. I hope you're ready for our first taste of adventure game bullshit. We need to get into the cinema, but it's closed and the guy sweeping in front won't let you in. There's also an undercover cop straight out of a Raymond Chandler novel down to the voice standing in front of a manhole cover filled with green ooze. You have to click on the green ooze. April says it smells like kerosene, so I immediately try and light it with some matches, but it turns out this is more of a descriptive thing than an actual clue as to what to do. Next to the cop there's a malfunctioning power box that keeps turning off the theatre marquee. But you can't play around with it, otherwise the cop will yell at you. There's a back gate for the theatre, but it's locked, so we can't get in that way. Well, if you go to your flat, there's this weird contraption that is apparently the boiler to your building, which is just lying out in the street for anyone to fuck with. And if you interact with it, you'll notice that one of the cables is cut, and your landlord's girlfriend jury-rigged a spring clamp to hold one of the pipes closed. To connect the cable, you'll need to read the corkboard, because now there's a little note from your landlord saying that she found a ring, and claim it. You'll need to use the post-it note on her, then use the ring to connect the cable. Bear in mind, these are live cables that you just connect with your bare hands despite having rubber gloves. Ironically, the actual use for the rubber glove is another puzzle on a junction box, where you need it to protect yourself against electricity. Just roll with it. Strap in because we are only halfway done with this puzzle. If you're like me, you probably didn't notice that if you use the interact function on your bedroom window, you can stick your head out and see there's a rubber duck dinghy thing trapped underneath some rusty metal grating. You need this rubber duck. It is essential to the game. You cannot finish the game without the duck. So I hope you picked up some bread from the bread basket in the cafe so you can drop it down onto the duck so a seagull will peck it and deflate it, so it'll float free and end up downstream. Make sure you pull the chain up though, because otherwise you'll miss out on the clothesline. Next, combine the clothesline with the clamp, then the duck with that, but only after you've inflated it. Quickly use this thing that you've created on the electrified train tracks in the subway station to pick up a key that you won't notice unless you're pixel hunting. Add that to the sin board. This won't work because the clamp has to close around the key while it's down there, so you have to release the air valve and the duct first, so the clamp will slowly close while it's down there, which I don't know how that works. That's not how inflatable things function. But I think we left logic back at the fucking cinema, so time it right and you should now have a key. Now, go back to the cinema and dump the hard candy into the street ooze in full view of the cop. Exhaust the cop's dialogue options until he mentions that he wants one, and give it to him. He obviously spits it out, and this pisses the guy off sweeping the front, and he runs away like, this. Now that you've likely given him the kind of disease that hasn't been seen since the Middle Ages and got him assaulted, make sure to steal his hat too since he dropped it. Now you can use the fuse box, again in full view of the guy sweeping the front, so that he opens up the side passage. If you didn't think this would be the end of the entering the cinema puzzle, you would be correct. The back door is locked and the only way to get into it is to start a fire. But just starting a fire doesn't do anything, he'll just put it out. Instead, I hope you picked up whatever this monstrous contrivance is from the wardrobe.
Hey! You! Yeah, you! Hands up! Spread your legs! And do the monkey!
Mildly amusing, but irritating as hell. I think I'll shut him up now.
Now, put the hat on top of the rubbish pile so that this shadow resembles the cop from earlier with a gun, so the guy is held at gunpoint by the somehow perpetually repeating clockwork monkey that he never looks in the direction of. With that, you are finally inside the cinema. I don't think I need to explain why that was a shit puzzle. It's like the perfect storm of all the worst aspects of adventure game puzzle design coalescing into one giant maelstrom of bad ideas. It's the kind of puzzle that's so revered for its arcane bullshit that it's transcended into being the part of the walkthrough where the person writing it changes styles and now has to warn you about that bit. Pixel hunting, moon logic, awkwardly timed reflex sections, an excessive amount of required yet missable items, and stretched over several sections where fast travel isn't possible. This one puzzle collects bad adventure game tropes like it'll get the 6th one free. It's to the point that I'm kind of awed by it. I admire its purity, unclouded by logic, mercy, or delusions of sanity. This puzzle has blue-screened me like no other puzzle has before. While I was doing background research for the game, I found out that this duck has since become an inside joke for fans, and I can see why. Thankfully, we never get a puzzle this bad again, but we're not entirely done with arcane nonsense. There's still plenty of batshit left in the tank. The game acknowledges this as soon as you enter the cinema, but that doesn't fucking excuse it, and our reward for doing all of this is listening to Cortez wax poetic about old films in a way that comes off like a wrong generation post.
Are you in some kind of trouble with the police? Wait, don't tell me. Immigration.
Jesus Christ, April, just because he's a different ethnicity doesn't mean he's hopped a fucking border.
You're just being cryptic again. It's like soap opera sex. Lots of boring dialogue, and when they finally go to bed, everything's dark and covered by blankets.
You want the full Monty then? Come with me. Come outside. No more talk. I will show you the truth. This is probably as good a place as any.
April, maybe don't follow men you don't know into alleyways that offer you the full Monty. I don't know if you know what that means.
Stand back, señorita.
What for? What are you doing?
Why, Alice, I'm sending you through the looking glass.
Okay, maybe he just wants to sell you pills. That's at least less directly threatening.
What? What is that? Please tell me it's a hologram.
This is where the game goes full mist, and you get your first look at Arcadia. Unfortunately, the way they introduce it, and the fact that it directly follows on from the worst puzzle in the game, makes it fall flat a bit. The first look you get at Arcadia is just this hallway in an atrium, and you'll be looking at it for a fair few dialogue boxes yet. Through magical contrivance, you're able to translate the local language, and you can wander around without any real goal if you like, but you'll likely want some context, so you can talk to Vestrum Tobias and get to see the city proper. If you talk to Tobias and completely exhaust his dialogue options, by the way, you're in for 20 fucking minutes of exposition. That is not an exaggeration, I timed it. This is a running problem with the game. It will, on multiple occasions, decide to pin you down and vomit dialogue. While on the one hand it is impressive to not only write all of this lore and have it fully voiced, there isn't actually a single throwaway line that isn't voiced in the whole game, to be fair, but on the other hand there is so much extraneous detail in here that it hurts the game's pace. I don't think it helps that this game's main story beats aren't actually anything particularly new or interesting. If you've seen fantasy media before, you'll likely pick up on a lot of repeated beats, and the pure, distilled narrative in its base components doesn't boil down into anything more beyond a dark force, a mysterious prophecy, and a quest to save the world, which is about as stock as it gets. The game's most interesting writing comes from its character interactions, though I will admit that many of these are an unfortunate byproduct of the game's time. A snarky teen and an equally snarky animal companion we get later were already pretty worn archetypes by the end of the 90s, and have continued to wear down ever since.
I'm in my undies. That's so not appropriate.
It's fallen out of the press now, but there was a semi-recent surge of articles calling out Whedon dialogue, and the overabundance of it in everything. A seeming fear from the writers to have any genuine character interaction, and instead cram in a lukewarm jab and the kind of painfully unfunny observational comedy that serves as cheap, ineffective character banter to try and force chemistry where there is none, with dialogue that could be cut without any effect. It also affects the amount of downtime you see in a scene. Some writers have become terrified of the prospect of silence, and feel they need to have their characters say something all the time to fill dead air. But it's not dead air. Silence is sometimes as useful a tool as a line of dialogue. It's a well-beaten horse at this point, and the blame for it is usually placed at Joss Whedon's feet, which isn't without merit by any means, but I don't think you could call him the only source. More the tinderbox that led to the house fire. However, a lot of more horrendous things have also been placed there, so I don't want to give the man too much sympathy by playing devil's advocate. The game's director even stated in interviews that a lot of April's writing was very Buffy inspired, so there's your smoking gun. Fun fact, in literary theory, this kind of writing has a name. It's called bathos. You know, like pathos. Be sure to use this newfound knowledge to make people quickly find other reasons to talk to different people at parties. I got that information from this video if you're interested, by the way. Bear in mind though that I say this as a Buffy fan, but I can't deny that Buffy is essentially patient zero for this kind of writing, and it did an ungodly amount of damage. We started the incubation period at the Bronze, we hit the prodromal incline with Mal Reynolds, and by the time Whedon got a hold of Robert Downey Jr., there was no hope of remission, and it subsequently infected 2/3 of mainstream Hollywood's writing staff. April embodies this absolutely. Like Buffy, she's a teen with a lot of awkward teenage girl dialogue written by men in their 20s and 30s, and she moonlights as the chosen one. That would write her off as another casualty of Whedon, but where April differs is on two fronts. On one front, April does have a character arc that's handled decently sometimes, where she becomes progressively more serious and efficient towards the end of the game. Yes, I also know that's how Buffy progresses, but it's still something. The other is that she's a fucking psychopath. She ruins several people's lives in the name of puzzle progression, and she never shows any remorse. And she regularly just talks shit in full earshot of complete strangers she just met.
The old man and the, ocean? Looks like a lifetime at sea has left its tracks on him.
You might want to consider waiting until you be out of earshot before you badmouth me.
You've got the expected adventure game protagonist problem of stealing everything that isn't nailed down, that's standard. But later, April will do things like heckling a news broadcast in front of a fatal crash for fun, intentionally sinking a boat full of civilians in the middle of an ocean, despite not knowing how to swim, and stealing a man's eyeball, and most likely getting him fired as well. Getting back to Tobias, I hope you have a pen and paper because this game really wants you to care about its lore. In the game, there's a cosmic force called balance. Essentially, reality now exists in two separate spaces. One is a fantasy kingdom ruled by magic, and another that's ruled by science. Arcadia has magic, but the problem with magic is that it really doesn't like physical rules like gravity and energy. So technology has sort of stagnated because it's hard to predict how magic is going to react to the invention of the spinning jenny. And yes, this does kind of sound similar to Arcanum. Stark, on the other hand, is essentially the world as it is. Rules like gravity, force, and electricity are pretty ironclad, so technology has to form to make life more efficient by exploiting natural forces. Doing this has resulted in all the problems we're familiar with, but the lack of magic has made the world somewhat less chaotic. Though I disagree with the game's sentiment that science has yet to equal the terrible chaotic power of magic, because, we sure as fuck tried. It didn't always used to be like this, though. At some point, both realities existed together. Both magic and science occupied the same space. For a while, this went pretty alright, until humanity started fucking around with this power in some unspecified way that began to threaten the balance and make humans too powerful for their own good. Apparently this had gone unchecked on other worlds before, and what tampering with the laws of the cosmos results in is the Elder Gods looking at you sternly from over the top of their newspapers and saying, "Right mate, have a fucking word," and hitting the cosmic reset button. To stop this happening again, because I guess the 20 or so times it had already happened were definitely the last straw this time I swear, the slightly more original looking DeviantArt scaly personas decided that the best way to avoid this cycle is to split reality into two worlds that should never touch, lest the Elder Gods have to deliver another cosmic slap. To do this, they built a big fuck-off tower that somehow channels both the energy of eating rocks and wearing JO crystals with back-alley crack labs and Boston Dynamics sex bots. The catch is that to make sure magic and science stay balanced, they need to stick someone in between it to act as a sort of human graphite control rod for 1,000 years. What decides who gets to sit in a tower for a millennia? It's never really clear, but it's random allocation from the sounds of it. The problem is that while humans populated much of the world, it was also shared by inherently magical creatures like dragons, the Ewoks, and whatever this thing is. So apparently people weren't consulted about this before they hit the big split button, and half the human population seems to have been transported to Stark, and the other stayed in Arcadia. Where this sounds messed up is the fact that the choice was random, so some people got separated. But also the fact that Stark seems to have developed the same way as Earth in our reality, since there's references to real movies like the Maltese Falcon on the cinema marquee. So what I can only assume is that people who are used to living in an advanced society were suddenly sent packing with fuck all help to what must have been the Paleolithic era. Otherwise I can't imagine civilization would have developed the way it needed to reach our realities where the Maltese Falcon exists. Hey mate, my wife and kids are still there, could I at least say goodbye or Oh right. Does anybody know how to make a fire? The key to returning reality to its original form is made during this process. It's a disc, with several stones in it, that gets divided into 4 and given to various sentinels for safekeeping. Repairing the disc is only necessary if 1. Reality needs to return to the way it was because people have sublimed essentially and can handle things being back the way they were, or 2. Reality as it exists now starts to break down because something has gone wrong. Something has gone wrong. The previous Guardian has abandoned his post, and there's a pro-unification fringe group of the Sentinel that's gearing up for war. Quite what the plan is to deal with the Elder Gods when they get there, I don't know, but they've kept the change of the Guardian at bay for around 200 years by kidnapping and studying children that are born into the balance in an attempt to manufacture some kind of counter-Guardian. Vestrum Tobias just sort of leaves after dumping this on you and lets you get on with it, so at least now we can explore the city proper. It's called Mercuria, and compared to Venice, I think we lost something. We will still get some nice backgrounds in Arcadia, but it's never quite as instantly striking as Venice was. That's not to discount it entirely though. There's still that little dab of surrealism that I live for hiding in there, with the detailing of some of these buildings looking like Gaudi made them, and I'm all for that. My barometer for surreal fantasy usually caps out with Morrowind and Xenoclash, and while I wouldn't call any of the visuals alien on quite the same level as those games, the added element of some Nordic folklore influences brings in the kind of off feeling you get from some of those really early Brothers Grimm illustrations. Funnily enough, you can actually talk to a few people in Mercuria that support the idea of a reunification, or at least some kind of opening of some kind of travel between Stark and Arcadia. While people in Stark don't know about Arcadia, those on the other side are fully aware that Stark exists and are often envious of it, given the fact that technology and therefore industry has been able to advance there thanks to more predictable natural laws.
Stark and Arcadia belong together, not apart.
Case in point, if you go down to the docks, you can talk with the sea captain to find out that his boat hasn't moved in months, because the local alchemist keeps griefing the town by casting Dispel Wind from his floating goon cave. You can listen to even more extensive dialogue if you talk to the other sea captain. The game even makes a joke about it by having April fall asleep midway, but that doesn't excuse it. Coming back to this guy will be important for 2 puzzles later, by the way, so we're not done with this boring fuck with the Habsburg jaw. We do learn that the Bird and the Cups game belongs to him, but that's also another puzzle to put on the back burner. First, you need to figure out how to shift back to your old world so you can start to be able to shift between the two more easily. We need to find Cortez's mate to do this, but we don't actually know where he lives. So April takes a job delivering maps because the previous delivery boy was fired for, well...
Give me back the delivery list and get your sorry blue skin elsewhere!
This doesn't seem to bother April in any way. She just wants the job and we can use that job to find the guy Cortez told you about. You're gonna have to do some bullshit to deliver maps to different people first though. Brian Westhouse is a drunk guy living in a house that's essentially squaring up to coastal erosion and saying, "You what, mate?" He's also a time traveller from the 30s. Apparently getting shifted and being stuck between Stark and Arcadia means that time passes differently relative to Stark, and what's been 15 years to him is a few hundred years in Stark. Given that these are supposedly two different worlds, they could be far enough away from each other in space for that to happen. Similar to how it does in real-life space, but it's never mentioned. It also has no bearing on the plot at all. You'd expect something to have kicked off in your absence, but each time you shift, time seems to run mostly parallel. I like this character though. Self-destructive melancholy characters like this can be harder to pull off than you'd think, and I think the majority of the heavy lifting is being done by the performance.
I stay here because I'm a true masochist, Miss Ryan. And who forced you to come? Was it Cortez?
This game's dialogue can be on the nose at best and sort of grating to listen to at worst, but I think he suffers the least from it. He also offers you Glenfiddich, which is odd. I like whiskey, but I can't pretend to know much about it. But I know enough to know that that's a real one. I'm more of an Aldi's Special Highland Earl kind of guy. It's basically paint stripper, but if I put it in a fancy decanter, I can trick myself into thinking it's nice. He doesn't actually know how to shift you back, but he does give you a pocket watch that belonged to Cortez that inexplicably opens one. Apparently, non-shifters who try to shift back won't be able to and get stuck in space or something to that effect, so only you can pass through. This is what happened to Brian, and it's why he's stuck here. When you get back, Cortez will still play mysterious if you ask him why so many people seem to know him, and you'll get the formal challenge to find the disc and the accompanying 4 gems, 2 of which are in Stark, the other 2 in Arcadia. While the Vanguard, or Sentinel in Arcadia, is gearing up for war, the Vanguard in Stark are actually a conspiracy hiding behind the guise of a religious organisation called the Church of Voltec, which is a bit like if the Church of Scientology owned Megacorps and intercontinental ballistic missiles. If you make the sane choice and decide not to follow up on that date with the incel next door, he quite literally tells you how he's a nice guy right after calling you a bitch and threatening to kick your head in. Then he slams the door in your face to go and write the kind of green text that would probably light up like a Christmas tree if you Control F any number of slurs. He also says pretty much exactly the same thing if you do go on the date with him, because it went about as well as you'd expect, and April had to kick him in the dick. These 2 options don't change anything beyond a couple of lines of dialogue, but it's still neat as an option. Something relatable is the fact that even though the alternative is going on a long, difficult quest to save the world that might get you killed, you still put off your final project. You can literally do anything but work on your painting. The game won't let me. To track down the Vanguard, you'll have to go to the kind of neighbourhood where you don't even get asked the time before getting shanked for your phone, and it looks like something straight out of a 2000 AD page. Cortez tells you to find the boy who made the painting he showed you earlier, but given that you don't know where he is, you need to ask someone most likely to know the home address of a child. A priest. This priest does not even question why you want to know the whereabouts of this child and gives you the address without any questions, which is interesting. Warren is a jaded kid that sits in the staircase of a wrecked apartment complex, and he won't just hand out information for free. But the price he sets for giving you information on the Church of Voltec is to break into a police station in broad daylight, get him information on his family, while simultaneously deleting his criminal record, and get out without anyone noticing, which... 1, that's technically 2 favours, so I feel like you're taking a piss a bit there, mate. And 2, it requires breaking into a police station in broad daylight. I understand that the suspension of disbelief is practically held by a bungee cord in adventure games, but narratively speaking, you still have to limit your protagonist to some realistic boundaries for what the character is reasonably capable of doing. If April was some kind of experienced cat burglar breaking into a bank vault at the start of the game, I wouldn't think twice. But as it stands, we're just a uni student with one not really very useful magical power. Warren does drop some Stark lore in here that his dad sold his family out to an off-planet settlers colony in exchange for cash, and Warren escaped. In Stark, space colonization is essentially done via indentured service contracts, where once you sign, you relinquish all personal autonomy and possessions in favour of being sent to help build colonies on alien planets. I mean, it's not like space colonies can be really fucking dangerous places to be in science fiction or anything. On the way to the police station, the game pulls something that it never repeats again, where you'll get jump scared by a news fly-in and the game suddenly has April heckle the newscaster. Like, I can't tell her not to do this, the game does it of its own accord. April doesn't stop at this either. If you talk to the guards, she really wants to poke around at the dead bodies in that crash shuttle. We do need to get in there later and ransack it for spare parts for a puzzle, so we're not done tampering with the crash site. But for now, the police station doors are fucked, so we're not getting in without hiding it out in a bin lorry. Which surprisingly doesn't crush us, but does mean that we apparently now smell like arse. This is only the start of the police station bullshit, since even the internal doors are fucked, and there's no manual release in this public building, which seems like a bit of a fire hazard. There are repairmen set to repair the doors, but they'll quote union regulations at you and refuse to repair anything short of official documentation, which starts a long process of distraction mechanics and bureaucracy jokes, which takes a while. You can also call your mother in this scene, and it's probably one of the strongest cases for the quality of this game's voice acting so far. In a moment of genuine drama, April confronts her mother about why she ran away from home, specifically because of her father, and it's played out well. We don't get the full story yet, but it's obvious that her father might have been, Okay, I don't fancy drawing the wrath of the YouTube bots, so I won't actually say the A word, but you get what I mean. Apparently, April nearly killed him by throwing him down a staircase, and now she's here. The vast majority of the game's voice acting is spot on for what it needs to be. The game's script is not the best, but not the worst either. For every good line, there are about 12 groaner ones, and some of the more serious scenes can be hamstrung by its obsession with turning to the camera and winking hard enough to make a contact lens hit terminal velocity. So it's a testament to the actors that they're able to read these lines and still make them sound cohesive, even if they're forced or awkwardly written. There's a lot of voice acting as well. Some characters, especially those with the duty of expositing you to death, have an absurd amount of recorded dialogue. I still think it's too much dialogue and could have used a bit of editing, but the effort is appreciated. There are a few wonky voices here and there, and there's one example later that's particularly bad, but it's acceptable. Apparently the recording process for this was done via the actor demo CDs being sent to Norway, and eventually the game was recorded in New York with the main actors supposedly being in the same space for all of the recorded dialogue to play off of each other more naturally. It's an effect that works well, though you will occasionally get some overlap, and you can definitely hear some pauses that were written in, but again, it's putting in more effort than it ever needed to. Adventure games have always been the target of derision because they've garnered a bit of a reputation. When compared to other types of game, they are attractively easy to make in the eyes of less reputable companies that just want to spaff out cursed shovelware. But if nothing else, you can say that The Longest Journey is trying and at no shortage of cost. This game was not made cheaply. Well, it was, but at least not by the standards of the Norwegian games industry at the time, and compared to the kind of budgets that the heavy hitters were pulling in and the increasing scale of the game industry as a whole. The Longest Journey was made for 21 million Norwegian kroner, which, if this conversion is right, is about £1.5 million, or nearly $2 million at the time of writing. Funnily enough, the Norwegian voice for April Ryan was done by a Norwegian TV presenter called... Oh, for fuck's sake, hang on, let me give it a try. Synnøve Schwabo, I think. I have no idea who she is, since she seems to be a very local celebrity to Norway, but I thought it was an interesting fact. Back at the police station, the detective we spoke with sewer suites earlier is currently shitting his brains out in the bathroom. We can pretend to be a cop and he'll ask you to get his stomach meds from his locker, so naturally we rob him blind and steal the passcode to the computer system. We don't stop there though. We also wait for him to have an allergic reaction to the medication and sneeze so we can swap out his synthetic eyeball for a toy one. But he does seem to have no qualms about slotting his eye back in right after it's been rolling around on the floor of a public bathroom, so I guess he obviously had other things going on. With the passcode, you learn the name of the church's leader, or at least its figurehead, and delete the arrest record. And bearing in mind, we do all of this on the detective's account, so not only have we made him just shit himself after death and stole his prosthetic eye, we also probably cost him his job as well. The destructive path of the adventure game's protagonist knows no bounds. You also steal a data cube thing, but you can't access that for now, so we just leave. Making sure to pick up the completely unassuming screwdriver from the nearby door, of course. This screwdriver is vital to a later puzzle, so that's another one next to the key from earlier to mark down on the hidden vital objects chart. But once you've traded the information, you now have access to Burns' flipper.
Oh, sure, I date 15-year-olds all the time.
Whatever. So, what the fuck do you want?
The data cube has evidence the police, or whoever, it's never really explained since the church is sort of implied to own the police, but it's information gathered on the church running genetic experiments on kidnapped victims, as well as a recording of a speech from Jacob McCallan giving a kind of purge the non-believers type thing. But given that this is meant to be a secret speech for the church's eyes only, A, why record it if it's so sensitive, and B, there's what sounds like a pretty sizable crowd in the background of this speech, and you can't background check all of those people. And the recording has cutaways and the type of high-angle shots you'd get from cranes or skycams, so it's obviously professionally done and not a secret recording. It seems like making an extremely public speech declaring war on the world and then hiding it in a mostly unsecured high-tech deposit box is a little bit like planting your own smoking gun. Supposedly the church is running a cover operation and is actually based in an office complex in the upper city, which we're going to need a fake ID to get into, which won't come cheap. And April has no money, so we need to find another way of paying. And like any Discord moderator, Burns immediately thinks that April is offering to fuck him transactionally.
Would you consider alternative forms of payment for a fake ID?
Sorry, Chiquita, that urge disappeared with my little legs.
What we actually need to do is to go back to the scene of the tragic death crash and loot the wreckage for parts, which, again, April has no issue with doing, so we can swap it out for the broken part in his hover chair in exchange. The ID is going to take a while though, and according to Cortez, Arcadia is on the verge of war, so you've got to hop over there as soon as you can. Meanwhile, Cortez gets arrested by a man whose coat is apparently having some kind of episode. This is a pre-rendered cutscene, so surely they must have seen how the render came out with the physics bugging out like this. I can only assume that there just wasn't enough time to fix it. There's a lot of clipping in this game generally, to be fair, but it's mostly unnoticeable, just a bit odd. You're back in Arcadia, and this time we have no clothes again, and I can already hear the heavy laboured breathing of the 90s games journalists like a horny spectre. Par for the course of any gaming magazine article or online publication of the time, reviews for The Longest Journey didn't escape the leering 90s to mid-2000s games journalists and their pathological need to compare every female protagonist to Lara Croft. In this case, the writer compared the two for the fact that both characters are women. I mean, she doesn't look like her, you don't dual-wield pistols at any point, and she isn't a psychotic relic thief with an indiscriminate kill count. I like the night atmosphere of Arcadia. It's got that warm summer night feel to it. And to get even more cozy, we find this nice inn where the landlord takes you in and...
I bought it with money earned through honest trade in the Southlands. Tobacco, wine, slaves...
April has absolutely no issue with this, by the way. She never mentions it, and it doesn't seem to faze her a bit. In the tavern, you can also find Obnaxus, who belongs to a humanoid species which sees all of time simultaneously, past, present, and future. So this means that the tense of his dialogue jumps all over the place. It's a neat concept, and one that annoyingly doesn't get explored enough. There's some good sci-fi meat on those bones, and mostly it just boils down to him giving you the same sage but uncertain advice that every character in the game does. Though I feel for the voice actor, it must have been a bastard to record with the tense changing all the time. Fun fact, if you picked up the fake plant at the start of the game, you can use it in the garden near Obnaxus' house the next day to unlock the Book of Secrets. It's just a collection of cut content and bloopers that you unlock for finishing the game anyway, but it's a cool extra.
Man, you got a fine fart.
Obnaxus will give you the possible location of one of the dragons, and if you want to exhaust all of his backstory and context dialogue, you'll be listening to him go on for another full 20 minutes. Again, this game needs some editing. This is not the first nor the last time that the game has vomited exposition onto you, and it's made worse by the fact that this conversation just reiterates the points you already know. Darkness and chaos bad, find dragons, restore balance, etc. This character's only purpose is to brief you again in Act 3 when shit is really kicking off. You do learn that at some point a god might have fallen into the sea that matches the description of a dragon, so you've got to find a boat to charter. If you ask the old fisherman, he'll give you a story about people being eaten by mermen, but that's not important. They're actually pretty chill, they just have some odd religious practices. This return to Arcadia is a slog to get through at the start because it's front-loaded with so much exposition in quick succession. Get Arcadian history from the landlord, get sea lore from the fisherman, get whatever the fuck Obnaxus was talking about.
I'm smoking on that Sumerian Quasimodo carpet bomber, obsequious demon whisperer runts.
Talk to Tobias again and get told to go to the archive to try and learn more about the dragons and the gateway. Then go to said archive where the librarian introduces himself by mentioning the dark people.
Although they say the dark people have a library as big, if not bigger, than this one.
What he actually means is these lads from later, but that's still a really unfortunate name to give your fantasy race. Jesus Christ. On top of spending nearly an hour on lore, you now have to read several books worth of extended lore, and every single time you ask for a book, you have to watch this long, excruciatingly slow animation of the librarian getting a book before you can read it, which you are then forced to watch again when he puts the book back, which, to be honest, it just sort of looks like he hooks it out of a window off camera. And then on top of that, you can't just enter the dialogue tree again. You have to walk over to him, click on him, and skip through the introductory banter before we get the option to pick another book. There's a lot of waiting for slow animation in this game. It's obvious that they paid for these animations, and from the look of them, some of them are motion captured. But do we really have to wait this long for someone to get into bed? Or waiting for these twig men to fuck off?
Thanks, lady.
You could just say skip the dialogue if it's that tedious, but that sort of defeats the purpose of playing a game like this. Even in games where the story is so secondary to be essentially non-existent, I'll still sit through the dialogue since I like having context, even if the context isn't that interesting. I've never really understood the mentality of skipping dialogue since it's obvious that someone meant for you to hear it, so you might as well hear what they have to say. Now if you've played the game already, then I can understand skimming through some bits. But I've met people who will buy a brand new game they've never played and start skipping dialogue, which is just weird to me. That's probably a pretty small minority of players though. At least, I hope it is. Plus, I'm the one that decided to make this video. I should at least do my due diligence and try and see every bit of the game I can, if I want to consider myself qualified enough to talk about it to people. Eventually, you'll find the actual location of the island you need to go to. So now, after all that, you need to try and charter a boat, but first you're going to have to solve some more puzzles. The boat is stuck in the harbour because the alchemist keeps turning the wind off, and it has no navigator. The captain of the ship is also old school superstitious and doesn't allow women on board, but if you can sort out both the former, then he's open to waiving the latter. Well, he's open to it after we resolve the bird situation. The old fisherman on the shore is owed a favour by the captain, so if you get his bird back from the shifty cups dealer in the town square, then you'll at least have a chance to reserve a spot on the boat before we solve the wind situation. The cups game is rigged, but with the power of the world's strongest magnetic screwdriver, seriously, I don't know how strong that magnet would have to be to do that, we can fuck up the game and win the calculator. Then you can trade the screwdriver for the bird, which you angrily shove into your pocket. The bird really doesn't want to go back to its owner, but please for mercy fall on deaf ears when you're dealing with April Ryan.
No, not back in the chest, not in the chest!
I'm starting to think we might be the baddies. I mean, he comes back, but April didn't know that he would escape and was fully okay with just handing him back to this man. Favour cashed, you still need the wind and the navigator. Bird meets you halfway to the Alchemist Tower and ticks off another brief-lived 90s cliché, that being the obsessive need for films and games to have a typically non-human, but not always, one-dimensional sidekick to make quips and generally ruin any attempt at trying to have a serious moment. This was a bit of an epidemic, honestly. But Bird, or Crow as he comes to be known, isn't awful. He could easily be far more grating, and I think the voice actor manages to save some pretty dire attempts at humour. Not by making them funny, but by virtue of the fact that his voice is a lot less annoying than it could have been.
I'm not a sheepdog. Let's get that straight. You play your tune, and I'll consider your request. I won't be flapping to attention like a tame soldier hawk.
There isn't a ceiling for how irritating these kinds of characters can get, so I'll take it as a mercy that this is one I'm at least indifferent to. I still have no clue why he decides to shack up with a woman who happily traded him without a moment's hesitation, but whatever. Are you ready for some tonal whiplash? To be honest, this is less tonal whiplash and more like life-changing tonal nerve damage as a result of a 20-car motorway tone pile-up with only one tone survivor. You travel through the whimsical fairy tale forest and chat with the Norwegian Ewoks that call themselves the Banda, which April immediately discounts and essentially drops the racial slur by calling them the Mole People, a thing she does more than once. You agree to help the sad Ewok find his brother and head off on a magical trip through the Enchanted Forest and get involved in a classic fairy tale gingerbread scenario with this old woman, which April never picks up on despite the fact that she quite literally sounds like a cartoon snake with all the sibilants. The place predictably looks like a medieval torture chamber, and you're locked in here, so you try to break out with the help of the Banda in the wardrobe. But by the way, there's a child's skull on the table, and April just fucking steals it and hucks it through the window. There were other things you could have thrown through the window in here, April. You didn't have to full send the fucking child's skull through the double glazing. There was another adult skull, but only one of the skulls is selectable, which makes me think it's April stopping us from doing it. She has a deep need to throw it. Normal skull? No. Child skull? Yes. Either way, the Banda runs off, the old woman comes back, and we get nightmare fuel in a pre-rendered form. Do you want to know what this 3 AM clothes pile face is called? The fucking Gribbler. Something with a face out of a Francis Bacon painting has the kind of name that a character that steals your pie recipe and speaks in rhyme would have in a Dr. Seuss book. Again, the tonal whiplash. She won't do much, you just kind of awkwardly put the table between you and shuffle around until you step on a floorboard, which somehow causes a support beam to knock her into the fire, and now she's just kind of T-posing in there. Remember back when we were getting called a slag in a grungy dockyard? Naturally, the Banda fucking love this, and you get to go and smoke up with the Chief Banda at the celebration feast and go on an introspective drug trip in the sacred mellowing chamber.
doing here, you arrogant bitch? You don't think you can really save the world, do you? Who are you? Don't tell me you don't recognize me, April Ryan. I'm you.
This scene is weird because it implies more about April's character that isn't really as evident as it seems to think it is. Her mirror self says that she's only doing this for herself to right a past wrong, but from what we've seen of April in the game, she's pretty sure of herself. She doesn't seem to regret anything, even thinks she probably should, and generally seems pretty comfortable in herself. You could argue that she's hiding that, but given that we share her head for the duration of the game and she isn't shy about writing her feelings down, I don't think they were trying for an unreliable narrator. According to this, she's self-destructive and has some trouble letting people get close to her, but she's pretty calm and collected all said and done, and she clearly has lots of friends that she confides in quite openly throughout the game. It frames it like she's right on the verge of a mental breakdown and barely holding it together on a self-destructive binge, but other than the rough family life she ran away from, April doesn't seem to be affected by much and is quite steadfast. Not that these character traits can't be in there somewhere, but for it to matter in a scene like this, we need to have established these things, seen it front on, even if it's only a minor hint. But to the best of my knowledge, we don't get any indication of it, to the point where I think the game was probably written with a scene like this in mind because the director saw it in something else and thought it would be a cool thing to have, but then didn't really think about how it would mold around the character, or rather how the character would mold around it. From what we've seen, I can't really see April letting something like this bother her, so it feels out of place. What you can say for sure is that April's a fucking psychopath with no remorse. That's certainly been reiterated enough, but I don't think that was intentional. We are meant to like April, no matter how heinous a crime she commits. I also think this scene would have been better if they kept the other April in shadow instead of revealing her, but that's just a minor thing. The Banda Chief casually mentions that, oh yeah, sometimes the spirit chamber kills the unworthy, but cool that you had a dream, I guess. Also, you might be the Ewok Quetzat Haderach, and I've had this broken disc thing in the back cupboard for years now. Reckon it might be one of those bits of the MacGuffin you mentioned. Cheers, bye. Also, I never noticed until now, but that background is literally just a slightly edited photo of a real forest. I mean, I didn't see it until now, so I guess the hustle worked, so good on you, whoever that was. You continue on towards the castle, and the needle on the zany meter will continue to rock back and forth like it's about to snap off at any moment, with enough force to embed it in the dashboard. The big floating castle is anchored to the ground by a dude trapped in rock, and to loosen up his mouth you have to mix some random flower you found with some berries and just sort of smear it on his face.
Softer. Yes.
This guy has been petrified to act as a living drawbridge mechanism, and there's more like him throughout the castle acting as rock-clad flesh mechanisms, which is a pretty effective horror idea, but the game just uses it to make dumb jokes, and for saying that he's been stuck here for half a year, he doesn't seem too bothered about it, which kinda kills the horror. You get the fun of a labyrinth with these rotating gargoyles that all need different items, and it's mostly just a normal logic puzzle, except for the fact that I nearly shat myself when the game glitched out and wouldn't let me continue over the bridge. I was sure that I'd just locked myself out of the game, but luckily my obsessive need to create different save states actually paid off this time. The alchemist who lives in this castle is one of the strangest characters in the game. He channels Saturday morning cartoon villain energy so hard that I'm surprised the street sharks aren't rappelling through the stained glass windows. But then, in that same conversation, he also tells you how much he loves murdering children before you play a game of hopscotch with him. I have no idea anymore. You can challenge him to quite a few competitions, but only one of the options actually works, and you won't be penalised for just clicking through all of them. In the end, you trick him by using a calculator in a maths competition, and naturally he's so pleased by the concept of a calculator that this makes him start doing what I can only describe as Jim Carrey movements until the calculator somehow sucks him into it. I think I missed something in the exposition. I don't remember if there is ever a reason that the calculator does this. I don't know what I missed. I guess maybe because it's an object from Stark, but we've been bringing loads of objects from Stark, so I don't know. The Cups game bloke had it chilling on his desk, and Brian was cutting about with bottles of Glenfiddich, which must have come from Stark, and no one's been sucked into those. Maybe because the calculator is an ultimate symbol of logic compared to the more esoteric magical rules of Arcadia, it somehow has a reaction. Maybe they don't get on. But where do you draw the line? Would chiseling something into your stone tablet calendar to remind you to buy eggs be too logical and sucking your neighbour's cat? Where does it stop?
I am quite familiar with your world, you know. Automobiles, rocket ships, telephones, America's funniest home videos.
With the alchemist in the TI-83 dimension, the castle loses whatever control he had over it and starts to float upward, and apparently it's going to continue to move upward until it breaks orbit. So you've got to try and figure out how to bring the wind back. This alchemy puzzle is easier than it looks, and coming from me that's something since I struggle with the mazes on the back of cereal boxes. You can listen, touch and smell each of the potential bottles to find out what it might do, and then write those down relative to the information that you get from the recipe book on the pedestal to try and make potions with effects that will help you reach the other ingredients scattered around the room. You mix them in this sick looking cauldron and April makes batches of any of the potions you make, so you already know we're going to need those later. Some of these potions have some powerful effects, so honestly you might not even need Chosen One powers. Anyone who's played Morrowind knows that you don't need skill or training as long as you have max level alchemy and no gag reflex.
Whoa, I should save some of this stuff for the Olympic Games next year. It's a safe bet. I dominate the high jump and pole vault contests.
Isn't that called doping? I don't exactly know why this works, but they empty the potion into the clouds, which brings the wind back and you get the castle under control, which also causes everyone in the castle that was petrified to turn back, including the guy you left hanging from the bottom of the fucking thing, who apparently looks like what I'd imagine Mac from Mac and Me would look like if he'd gone really off the rails later in his life. What's funnier though is this shot where he loses his grip and keeps rolling for a few seconds. The camera just sort of locks onto him awkwardly. Again, there's some jank in these cutscenes, but I had to cut them some slack. They didn't have an infinite budget, but it just looks weird. Fucking excuse me, what? If you speak to Tobias again, he'll casually let you know that he thinks you're the next Guardian, which in this universe means setting aside 1,000 years to sit in a tower and stare at the wall waiting for something to happen. Here's your talisman, off you go. Make sure you got Snake downloaded on your phone or a really long book series or something like that. It's going to be a while. Naturally, April reacts to this by writing "so not fair" in her diary, so I guess there are worse ways you could react to news like that. You also pick up a navigator from the bar and make the captain eat his proverbial hat, so now we can set sail for new populations to terrorize. Chapter 6 is where April reaches her most unhinged yet, and it's by far the shortest. This ship has a special magic compass, and you are explicitly told not to put anything magical near it. Otherwise something disastrous could happen. Oh, also the ship that is going on a long sea journey only stocked 1 barrel of apples as far as supplies are concerned. This is important because a dangerous magical storm is blowing the ship off course, and it's no longer going to be making its destination for the safety of the ship. April isn't having any of this, and makes no reservations about sabotaging the ship's only food supply just to distract the captain and strap a talisman to the bottom of the compass when he's not looking. She has no qualms about doing this, and makes Star Wars jokes while she does it. This obviously causes the ship to sail into the path of the storm. The captain eventually finds the heavy-arse talisman you just sort of draped over the side of the compass and isn't too happy about it, but by this point April's already done all the damage she needed to, and the ship breaks apart like a Source Engine physics bug. I get the feeling that Chapter 6 was probably meant to be a bit longer at some point, but let's unpack that last scene a bit. This ship has gone down hard. Fully submerged in a matter of seconds with everyone on board. The ship was also apparently broken into pieces during this, and you were nowhere near any nearby landmasses when it went down, so there's a pretty high chance that several, if not all of the crew are now dead. I mean, they aren't. Crow mentions that they got away in the lifeboat while you were down in the hold trying to axe open a locked chest to steal your talisman back. But that's retroactive, and all we saw was the boat go down without a moment's warning. There didn't seem to be time to get in a lifeboat. April never has any regret for nearly killing an entire crew of people. She never addresses any of the things she does. She is absolutely one of the most unhinged, merciless adventure game protagonists out there, and that's a genre with a lot of contenders. Also, given that the captain decided to stock the boat for a long sea journey with only 1 single barrel of apples, I'm going to wager that there probably isn't anything to eat on that lifeboat. So there's still a pretty high chance that the crew could all die in a Donner Party situation. But April isn't bothered, enough to the point where she happily banters with Crow like nothing ever happened and sends him off to look for land. Thankfully, the mermen see April for what she is and drown her before she can do any more damage.
You're just like a seal, aren't you?
Sadly, they actually just take you to their weird Videodrome moon pool and Crow lands after you've gone. Side note, but characters say bloody a lot in this game, and it's weird.
Oh, bloody typical. I told her. She didn't believe me.
The Moja'll be cursed if I know why. But it's a bloody catastrophe.
Bloody typical. Those reactionary fools wouldn't extend a hand to help a drowning man if it violated the principles of their bloody balance.
I don't know how far it's travelled now, but bloody is typically a word so painfully English that it hasn't left here as far as I can tell. Mainly because it sounds kind of odd if you say it with any other accent. The reverse of that would be me saying ass instead of arse. I have no issue with using either, but when I say it, it just sounds weird. In all fairness, you don't hear many people use bloody in everyday conversation either. It's usually used in circumstances where you can't use the heavier profanity you'd usually have lined up, because either a young kid is nearby or you're not quite sure what you can get away with saying in front of your new boss yet. Or you're restricted by the age demographic for your game or film or whatever and need something to get around the censors. It just struck me as odd that a Norwegian game with a predominantly American voice cast would latch onto this word so much, especially since it's not like the game had any intention of censoring itself.
Hey, I'm warning you, don't fuck with those Vanguard shitheads. Yeah, they bite. And I bet you they don't let go like fucking, what do you call those little fucking dogs that don't let go?
Pit bull terriers?
Shit. Man, those things are nasty, fucking wicked nasty.
Anyway, getting back to the Cronenberg shit, the premise for this puzzle is honestly a bit nausea-inducing. You have to swallow a polyp to breathe underwater. Then you need to cut yourself so you can bleed onto a green ooze and roll a pearl around in whatever rancid mixture you've just made, so you can follow the polyp with a pearl chaser, and now you can talk to the merman. That, combined with the infected sagging flesh texture on the wall in the breathing chamber, makes this all feel like something out of the second half of System Shock 2. To be fair, the Mayrum do speak collectively like they have a hive mind, so that's sort of like the many. It turns out that the green ooze is some kind of magical energy source, and the Mermaid Queen has essentially locked you into servitude to collect it unless you can also become the fish Lizen al-Gaib. I don't really know why the game calls them mermen, they don't have human upper halves. This underwater society is simultaneously at war with a bird-like race of people above the ocean, and a large fish that stalks around the outside of the city. So the goal is to kill the giant fish and unite the clans so that they'll let you talk to their sleeping god, which you suspect is actually a dragon. This section is visually the most interesting the game has been for a while, but the puzzles seem to be taking a back seat. It's funny that the Lost Temple, where the forgotten knowledge that the bird and fish tribes were once united, is about 5 feet away from the entrance to the underwater palace, and only covered with a bit of seaweed. The Mayrum apparently never bothered to check what was in here behind the ring puzzle, and the Queen almost refuses to accept that it exists. The pacing for the game starts to pick up significantly at this point, and not necessarily for the better. This is a long game. I mean, it's in the title, so I'd expect it to be long. But where the puzzles and story beats felt nicely spaced in the earlier segments, even if the plot elements themselves and the puzzle mechanics could be spotty, these later segments sort of feel like you've started off strong at the museum, reading all the information plates and spending time looking at the exhibits and rubbing your chin thoughtfully. But now it's a bit later, you've got evening plans, and I guess it wouldn't hurt if you skipped over some stuff, and before you know it, you've exited through the gift shop. Before, over several chapters, we only really travelled between 2 cities, but now we're going into overdrive until we hit space. Literally, that's where we're heading. Proving the cliche true that once you've ran out of ideas, send them to space. April kills the big fish no problem, and takes its tooth as a trophy like she's fucking Predator, which is odd, since besides braining an old lady with a timber frame, she's not been set up to be a combat god, unless the prophecy is also turning you into Neo slowly. Water level MacGuffin acquired, it's onto the jungle and windy canyon zones to reunite the clans. I'm amazed we don't get a lava level at this point. The Mayrum unceremoniously dump you on the shore of the tropical island you were heading for anyway, like they're behind on fares. And I'm impressed with the sheer quantity of different environments they went for. This game didn't cut corners in that respect, and while I definitely feel like some sections are better than others, they really tried to make each location feel different. It's hard to top rusty Renaissance cyberpunk. That's certainly the high watermark for this game's style, and unfortunately I don't think they ever top it, but this is also nice. And it sort of feels like I've played the game in reverse. The tropical island is usually the first level by the laws of incrementally intimidating RPG level design, and nothing screams turn of the century video game like a tropical island. When I think 90s, I think comfortable tropical island levels. This one also happens to be populated by nightmare crabs that make pained braying sounds and seem to be prostrating themselves for some kind of mercy killing. The consensus for this area is that the Elation live on top of a dead volcano, but the road is out. The Elation being the tribe of avian creatures at war with the Mayrum. Add to that the twig men that live in the jungle that are having trouble with a depressed giant that has been asleep for a month and is snoring right next to some kind of ancient loudspeaker system that broadcasts all over the island. The giant is depressed because he almost killed one of the crab people accidentally and is now living in exile. So you've got to clear his name to get him to shut the fuck up so the twig men will help you reach the volcano. We've stepped right back into the bizarre children's fairy tale here, which again forces me to remind you that this is the same game with the edgy cyberpunk metropolis with the corporate cyber police, the trip-hop dive bars, and that one thin-skinned gooner. And we will be going back there. Eventually. To get the giant up, you have to link up the ancient intercom system through a series of ring puzzles which, if you have some common sense and logic, you should be able to figure out. So naturally I spent a good hour mashing stone keys into slots and pushing things without really knowing what I was doing or why I was doing it. Once again, I like adventure games. Adventure games don't like me. My brain is not wired for logic. Frankly, I don't know what it's wired to do. I mostly stare at the drywall and fugue and eat paper. You now have access to the island's proverbial orcs, and we wake up the giant.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now. I'm just stroking my shit.
Who'll be there?
The giant wants to clear his name with the crab people, so if you take him to the one that's having trouble shedding, he'll... Well, it kind of just looks like he kicks it over for a laugh and then the shell stays on, so fuck knows, but apparently the crab appreciates it. With the giant gone, the stickmen can start finishing construction on their giant crossbow that they're hoping will shoot them into the moon melee style. Unfortunately, there is no option to pull a New Vegas with the launch controls. Instead, you load up the crossbow with a homemade tether, and there's something about how she sprints onto the zip line before they have a chance to argue that's funny to me. Like she's dunking on their science project and dipping. I also like how, to do this, you need to steal Quammen's fishing line from under him, and he doesn't care at all. Of course, you don't bring it back either. You're still not done though, since the Elatians have locked their village down, and being able to fly kind of gives you an instant win in the establishing impenetrable fortress game, Telvanni style. I do like that you can keep bugging the bridge guard about a non-existent cave though.
Can you help me across?
No.
Is there another way to get into the volcano?
No.
I'm sure there's a secret cave somewhere that leads into the volcano.
No, there isn't.
There's always a secret cave.
Not here.
Are you absolutely sure there's no secret cave?
Human, you talk too much. Even for an elation.
Thankfully, you still have the feather potion, and combined with the draft you can take flight good enough for the guard to let you in, since they also have a Dune prophecy. I'm hoping that this commitment to the Dune coding will at least let us get to God Emperor of Mercuria, if they ever make a 4. You can listen to April monologue and berate Cortez clones for 20 hours. For saying that the Elation have locked down their village for God knows how long, none of them seem that arsed about you wandering in like you're here for the farmer's market. They just sort of say, oh, you're here? Cool, cool. They're chill with you cutting about the village, but to speak to their elder you'll have to pass their 3-stage password recovery test. This requires listening to 4 ancient stories that the Elation value. They aren't short tales either, and the important bits aren't spelled out for you, so you better be paying attention. Which is hard when you have to sit through 20 fucking minutes of this shit back to back while taking notes.
Moran was a handsome young Elation man with strong wings and a hardy beak. He lived below the white cliffs where the water was salty.
Just outside of the village of Jinjay. She had many times been forbidden.
And that she was not to worry. But the teller did worry. Because
Clear morning she climbed up the Tower of Light to the rock and the ice at the very top. From there she could see
to go on a pilgrimage, and the bond between the shores would often be cut while he was away. Wicked Torten's return to teach you that Shar was hurting.
I like some lore-heavy games, but I like it when it doesn't give me pop quizzes afterwards, and lets me go through it at my own pace. Tying it to a puzzle like this is an easy way to make what should be interesting folklore and learning about the Elation culture feel like revision. This game's writing is an overgrown 20-acre field, and it's in need of more than a bit of a trim. It's in need of an industrial harvester, an army of lawnmowers, and maybe a controlled burn. Sometimes you have to stop writing to write more. The Elder agrees to help unite the clans, and you set off to act as referee for the delegates at the entrance to the Lost City. At this point though, I'm stumped again. I kept wandering back and forth between the crab village and the temple ruins for a good few minutes before I accidentally moused over the hole in the middle of the map. I know it looks like a hole now that I've mentioned it, but my brain kept seeing it as a rock sticking up in a crater like it's a magic eye puzzle. When you descend, you get a really smoothly hidden transition from pre-rendered to in-game. At least on a CRT, it's a little less noticeable. You can see where the change happens here. The game followed the principle of the Malkavian mod and just turned your model completely black to fake a silhouette, but it's a cool effect. It does mean that they have to send you off camera before you reach the bottom though, so they can change the model back, but I respect that they took the time to make that little detail. Doing small things like this isn't always just as straightforward as people might think, especially in game design, which from what I understand is like playing 400-piece Jenga, where removing a piece has already collapsed the tower, but you won't know it until you're 200 moves into the future. This pre-rendered cutscene shows the two sides shaking hands in a way that looks less like shaking hands and more like... Yeah, right, this is going to sound weird, but you know that cutaway to entwining hands you'd see in a sex scene? It looks like that, and it gives this scene some weird connotations. But at least the peace talks went well, if that's the case. I also didn't realise that the Elation were meant to be lightly furred, and it's fucking off-putting to say the least. This game seems to like making characters unpleasantly fuzzy in a way that makes them look like they're considering using Rogaine. Like, they look like the outside of a kiwi that's backlit. Whatever, you get the stone, and it's time for some Lovecraft shit with the sleeping god.
Do not be afraid. I know what you are.
Even speaking to the dreaming dragon god under the ocean, you still get Prometheus Blueballed, and he never really answers anything. We do get his eye though, and he tells you that the gateway to the Guardian Tower is probably in space somewhere since it's moved around a bit. Which, I mean, you know how big space is, right? That doesn't narrow it down. Thankfully, he's got the Dark People on speed dial, and the unfortunately named lads with the robes have a map and a free stone, which is cool. You don't even have to do anything for it, which makes me think that there might have been a cut section on this ship where getting the stone was a little more involved. It's a shame really, because I love the architecture on their ship. It's got this weird spider silk by way of Geiger forest thing going on that makes up their living ship. Also, April just decides she's going to nap here on the spider jizz floor with no mattress or pillow or anything, so cool.
Did you sleep?
Very comfortably, thanks.
How? Mercuria is now abandoned, which has also somehow changed the weather and makes this wide shot so grey that it looks like you went out of bounds in Shadow of the Colossus. You don't get to investigate though, because the Nvidia blob shows up and you escape through a portal. Cortez didn't open this one, so I guess it's implied that you're getting better at opening them yourself, and it dumps you out into the cathedral. The priest finally drops the act and lets you in on what he knows about Cortez, which is, again, not very much. This game is the king of having you enter what feels like major confrontations, like you're heading for a big reveal, and then it just waves its hands around and gives you unfinished answers and more questions, hoping that you didn't think too hard about it. It wants this complex, sweeping fantasy narrative with all these nouns and prophecies, but all it really does is obfuscate what should be the understandable meat of the plot and bury it under a mountain of flavor text. Here's a fun drinking game for you. Take a shot every time this game mentions the words dragon, disc, guardian, balance, shift, or prophecy. You might as well start that saline flowing now, because you'll need your stomach pumped before you've even hit the halfway mark. We do get some borderline interesting backstory for the priest though. He's somehow a fantasy sentinel monk and a Catholic priest at the same time. He does some mental gymnastics to say that maybe God got drunk and made a balance as well, I don't fucking know. I'm not religious and I'm no expert, but I don't think the Bible ever mentions Twigman, unless it was something you got turned into in the Old Testament when God was on his sadistic spree in the Season 1 villain arc. I'm glad to be back in Newport though. There's a solidity to the Venice area that I really like. Unfortunately that won't last long though, because Zach ratted you out to the space church.
What are you doing to my friends?
If you cooperate, nothing. Nothing permanent, at any rate. But if you make this any harder than it has to be, I will have your friends shot.
This bloke they introduced in the suit is the artificial guardian that the Church of Voltec made to act like a plant while they killed or imprisoned the real guardian. And he's supposed to be one of the big bads of the game, but he sounds like someone trying really hard to be intimidating in the same way that a teenager would if they were cast as Iago or something in a school play. He speaks in what I guess was meant to be a creepy monotone whisper, but in reality it just makes it really hard to hear what the fuck he's saying.
With your good fortune and, shall we say, good breeding, I am certain you brought some valuable items back with you. I would expect no less from a bright and industrious girl such as yourself. So, give me what you have and let us be done with this nasty business. I will let your friends go, and then you and I will go on a little trip.
I don't know if the monitors they had in the studio at the time were cranked to fuck and they didn't notice, or maybe they just thought that the dialogue box would alleviate it, but I'm going to do my best to make him audible for you. Just know that nothing's wrong with whatever you're watching this on. If you can't hear shit, it's meant to be like that. Look at these waveforms, that's how stupidly low he's mixed.
Alright, release my friends and you will get what I have.
You are a very intelligent woman, Miss Ryan.
This game doesn't pull its punches though, and Emma gets shot right in front of you.
Shoot that one.
Emma! What the hell is going on?
Well, sort of, you'll see later. It sort of punches you and then retroactively apologises for it and then gives you 50 quid. What's funny is that the moment Emma gets shot, your journal updates, and in the nanosecond after her getting shot and April running away, she apparently penned a lengthy paragraph in her diary about it. It's written deadly seriously, but the image of her apparently writing this in the room seconds after she got shot and then dipping is funny to me.
Emma!
Updated my journal.
You confront Zack in the hallway about him selling you out, and thankfully the Vanguard even the score by doming him the second they reach the top of the staircase, which I'll give them points for. I like that this dude is tooled up, looking like something out of the Mechanicus, but you stop him with the flimsy door to your bedsit and dive out the window. You nearly get caught outside of the cafe, but shift through a mystery door to the old woman's cottage from the start, which, this is odd for reasons we'll find out later.
Did you bring me here?
You brought yourself here. But yes, I opened a doorway for you.
Why?
Because that's how the story goes, April. You escape. You outrun your pursuers, and your journey continues. It's been written, and we cannot change that now.
Where this is sort of hand-waved as being between states, like this old woman is the G-man, but you get some unfortunate backpedaling here as she explains that Emma isn't actually dead, just hurt. If you kill a character for the emotional shock and then revert it later, that's just cheap.
She is on her way to the hospital as we speak. But the others, Charlie, Fiona, they're angry at you. They blame you for Emma's pain and for not letting them in on the truth.
Okay, but is Zack dead? Break the previous garden out of prison and go to the portal. Got it. It's really fortunate that this game is set in the far future where commercial space travel is available, otherwise this would be really difficult. Mercuria is empty, and the enemy is apparently knocking at the proverbial gates, though we never really see them properly. Well, we do a bit, but it amounts to about 5 seconds, which makes me think that maybe there was meant to be some kind of city under siege section, but they didn't have the time or budget. Obnaxis is still knocking around, and doesn't really tell you much other than, oh yeah, by the way, I was holding onto one of the big important MacGuffin stones, so here you go, bye. They don't show him leaving after this, he just heads back upstairs. Either he's not asked about the invading army, or he's an open carry prepper that was just waiting for an excuse to exercise his Second Amendment rights, and the second we leave we'll hear a muffled loading of shells. The librarian is also around, and in a move I wasn't expecting, he tells you that Vestrum Tobias was assassinated while you were away. He says it so matter-of-factly as well. Again, maybe they wanted to show this but had to cut it. It seems like such an important character death to have happen off camera. He's been there since the start of the game, and honestly I just really liked his voice. I could listen to that man read a phone book.
Oh, my manners have abandoned me yet again. I'm afraid my preoccupation with ancient texts and the company of my fellow fathers have left me unequipped with the grace of social intercourse.
This guy is also not leaving, by the way. Also added to the list of the last line of defense is Brian Westhouse, although given his character it's quite possible that he was just rat-arsed and didn't notice, which is on brand. Again, I like this character. I seem to have a thing for self-destructive men out of time because he was giving me the same vibes as the pilot out of The Mummy, whose whole character is being drunk and sad he didn't die in the war, and the minute he gets to sacrifice himself, he fucking loves it. I love that character. To get out of Mercuria, you have to combine the stones above the Enclave underneath this dragon statue. But the catch is that the dragon's mouth that's supposed to melt the discs down is so encrusted with bird shit that it won't work. And April, being April, forces Crow to peck the bird shit loose, which he doesn't even protest that much. Like you could have gotten a stick. This is fucking weird, and I'm not going to question it any further. I just get the feeling Crow was probably into it.
I'm on fire!
I like that we get an explanation for the water pool in the library essentially being one big quench for a magic forge. That's cool design. It's fortunate that the legend of the disc is still known all these thousands of years later, and no one decided to renovate the library and put in a pool table or anything. Although I can't imagine exposure to seawater, air, and a dark cellar can be any good for these books. We shift back to the university art room this time, and since the old woman told you to do what you do best in order to shift, you can actually work on your project for once, which I don't know how much time has passed in Stark, but I can imagine it's probably pretty down to the wire at this point. This is the only time we get to see what April was actually painting, and it turns out to be a landscape of the area we woke up in at the start of the game. Only now, the white dragon is still there and slowly dying, as it turns out.
Mother, what's wrong with you?
Touch me, April.
When you say it like that, it makes it weird. Please stop. The voice acting does shine again in this scene, even if the writing still over-exposits, and April gets a genuine tender moment with the dragon. Again, we only really saw it at the start of the game, so it feels unearned, but it's played well.
When I die and turn to dust, be here then to witness the new mother.
I promise.
Be who you are, April. Do not be afraid of that.
Who am I?
My daughter. My own daughter.
I'd still say it suffers from the fact that this dragon hasn't been in the game since the start, so we didn't really get a chance to get to know it or care about it. So April mourning it like this falls a little bit flat since it doesn't feel earned. You give Flipper the star map to figure out where we need to go later once we're spacefaring, but for now you get the fake ID to get you into the upper city. So at least now we get to spend a little more time in the future. Or I guess present, given that these two worlds seem to exist at the same time, but at different stages of industrialization. While I like Mercuria, you spend the vast majority of the second act there and a decent chunk of the third, so it's nice to get back to familiarly grungy ground. It's got the appeal of going back to your home city. It might be run down, someone might paint your apartment lobby with a stomach's worth of second-hand lager, and I've slipped on a NOS can more than once since I got here, but it's home. Once you get to the upper plate, you... ugh. That fucked up looking kid is actually a solution to a puzzle. We're gonna need that pizza box he just threw away, I'm not joking. Once you get to the upper plate, you get a new outfit, which is cool. It's another detail that they didn't have to include, but they did, and I'm here for it. There's a lot of costume changes in this game, to be fair. The future renaissance is back in full swing in this wide shot, which is great to see. Out of all the styles the game has gone for, I think this is still the most interesting. It makes the upper city look like it was carved into the shell of some giant crustacean and embellished with bas-relief panels that make it look like the top of these buildings have been draped in some kind of silk. It's like if Coruscant had masquerade balls. Unfortunately, this is one of the last times you'll see the city fully since you're inside for Act 3, and these interiors just aren't grabbing me the same way. It's all mostly just stark and clinically corporate.
Stunning, in a creepy neo-fascist way.
You need to get past this receptionist, and she isn't having any of it. Even though you just spaff the remainder of your cash in the 23rd century equivalent of a Selfridges, he can still smell the pour on you. But even if you've already tried to bribe him and he's told you to fuck off, you can just walk back in with a New York accent, an empty pizza box, and a dream, and it'll still work.
Got a pizza delivery for Mr. McAllen.
Really? There's been no... Wait a second. Weren't you in here before?
Me? Nah. Been delivering pies to Venice. I ain't been up here before. Nice hood, clean pavements, good air.
Jacob McAllen is apparently growing replicants in his office, and you get pinched pretty much immediately, as you would expect. This adventure has been a lot of things, and subtle is not one of them.
I have an army of devoted soldiers in this building, Shifter. I run this city. What are you going to do?
Jacob is trying to do his big villain, "It was all me, you've walked right into my trap" speech, but it's hamstringed by the fact that his resulting plan is so fucking stupid that it feels like he genuinely wasn't expecting you and spends the next few hours winging it. His grand scheme starts with politely asking you for the MacGuffins, and not at gunpoint or anything. He just sort of stands there and asks you for them, so obviously you just sort of say, "No, fuck off." So he calls in a guard to awkwardly block the exit, moving his arms up and down like he's doing a really half-hearted squat, and you eventually hand them over. He then rockets down the bingo list of every villain speech cliche there's an entry for, complete with "we're not so different" and "your friends are the real villains" and "you are just a pawn in my devious scheme," followed by April really heavy-handedly repeating the cliff notes of everything he just said. Most of this you've known since you first got the data cube from the police station, it's not news. His master plan was to let you gather all of the shit and fulfill 2/3 of your prophecy and then mug you at the end like a school bully camping the end of the lunch line. This might have worked, but he doesn't kill you. Instead, he takes you on a solo tour, with no guards, and no weapon of any kind mind you, into the center of his shifter manufacturing plant. He activates the big reactor thing with the jewels while not even shuffle hiding the keyboard of this thing with his back like he's at a cash machine. He just brazenly does it while you're standing there, so obviously we now know how to open the Gatorade pod. He still needs you to tell him where the gateway actually is, so instead of tying you to an inescapable James Bond torture chair and getting the information that way, his tactic is to just politely ask you for it again.
It's in Reading, England.
I'm sorry, what?
Right by the train station, there's a quaint little coffee shop. In the ladies' room of that coffee shop, you'll find the gateway you're looking for.
Okay, I looked, and I guess she means the fucking Cafe Nero. When he finally gets to it, his method of making you talk is to leave you in the room unsurveillanced with his warrior shifter, singular, who despite supposedly being a super soldier experiment he's going to take over the world with, it just sort of slaps you lightly for no damage and looks like it's been let out of the tank early. You can sit here and tank it indefinitely, I think. So obviously you use the big master computer to run to the roof, where Cortez appears to magic missile the next stage in human evolution into the fucking pavement. Go on. Go on. Oh, okay. He just,
Cortez!
just disappears.
You've been keeping some rough company, señorita. Better be more careful in the future, no?
Cortez escaped prison because, I mean, let's be honest, Jacob McCallan's idea of imprisoning people is to leave them in a big room with the door unlocked, and one mutant, so I wouldn't exactly call this a deus ex machina. Apparently there's questions as to how we escaped the Vanguard agents, but it was one dude who, despite having a gun, decided to walk slowly after us and then get confused by the concept of a locked door, so I feel like that question's already been answered. He also drops that Gordon Halloway, the guy from earlier with the bad ASMR video voice, was also the Nvidia benchmark test this entire time. He's been split into two halves. One logical and calculated, which lets him make the galaxy brain move to send one dude after you, and the other more chaotic element, which seems to appear whenever it wants to chase after you. Gordon is the surrogate guardian that Jacob wants to put into the Guardian Tower instead of you. Interestingly enough, Cortez is still being cagey with you, so I don't think we'll ever get any of the answers.
Jacob McCallan? He's here?
It's his fucking building!
Why, if it isn't a family reunion, there is still time. You are blood of my blood, kin to my kin. You are immortal dragon, and our destinies weigh the scales of the universe.
Where do you get all those cliches, kin to my kin? Doesn't it ever bother you that you sound like a badly written play?
Oh well. I will not miss your sarcasm, brother. It always felt a little strained. Tabas!
Whatever, they're Dragon Brothers. One's evil, you get it. Quite why Cortez feels the need to hide this from you, since you learn about dragons pretty early on, and you see one at the start of the game, it's a mystery to me. It's fully possible I missed something, but I think the game just wanted to have a twist for its side character, and this is it. It feels awkward and half-finished and not particularly satisfying. Cortez's watch stops, which is apparently his heart, but we never see him die and they just fall off the building, and given that they're dragons, you have to assume they can fly. Either there was meant to be more here or they're doing a fake out to save him and return him later, but April seems pretty certain that he's dead and he never shows up again after this. So, I don't know. This game's narrative threads were already pretty tangled and rough, but now I think it's been stretched to its maximum. Things are starting to feel rushed. Naturally, the chamber housing all the magical items Jacob needed doesn't even have a password on it. Not even 123 written on a little post-it note. It's also just a containment chamber, as in it doesn't do anything except house the items, so it glows blue for no reason. These items aren't, like, dangerous or anything. Let's go to space! This game has a schedule and it's running an hour late and on probation. In the interim, they shot Burns, but they movie shot him, as in he has a solid few minutes to tell you where the portal is. Fun fact, the first thing she does after seeing Flipper die is pen a diary entry about going to space where she says, "Too bad I don't get frequent flyer miles." We get yet another costume change, and this time it's mineshaft chic. Off-world colonies exist in this universe as space labor camps that offer dangerous work and probably pay you in corporate Disney dollars so you can't leave. Somewhere Red Faction is happening, but we have more important shit to do, so you break out of this maximum security space station via the fucking air vent in the bathroom. Ironically, unscrewing the vent from the wall is the one thing we can't use the screwdriver for since we sold it to the Cups guy in Act 1. You've still got the space equivalent of 20p though, so it's fine. I don't think I've ever cared enough to grade the quality of bits of change, but they were on point when they made the 20p piece. Firstly, it's a heptagon. That's just a mad shape already, so points for creativity. And secondly, it's basically a Phillips head. Sticky camera plates fear the man with 20p in his pocket. If you get caught, they just chuck you back into the main hall and don't bother to gate off the vent, so you can try as many times as you want and the guards won't care. And even if they spot you, they only briskly walk towards you like a security guard that thinks you got lost looking for the bog. I had to intentionally run at him to get this fail state. You're not in any danger. You have to kill one of the cameras via an off switch on the camera body, which seems like a design flaw for a security camera, then spike the control room guard's coffee with Viagra while he's out.
This doesn't taste right. I feel... Mary, Mother of God. I really feel... God damn. Madam Joy's Pleasure Suites on the promenade had better be open. This constitutes an emergency.
Jesus, I hope he doesn't have any heart conditions. Now we can switch the guard patrol patterns. This map is kind of nightmarish to transpose onto the corridors you walk through to know which guards to move, but it could easily be worse. When you reach the cells they're keeping the previous guardian in, you... Oh! Are those scales, or is he wearing chainmail? His arms are so stubby, and he moves like he's 20 pints deep and trying to convince a cop he can still walk in a straight line. Either way, you have to do a small puzzle to repair the power loader in the hangar, but it's not particularly hard or interesting, and mostly just serves to make you watch more of the running animation. What is funny is the fact that April just stuffs him into this thing and says have at it. This is a man who hasn't ever seen fucking electric lighting, let alone had to play Elite Dangerous with the flight assist off in a bow rock.
Compared to this place, Arcadia was about as alien as my bedroom. Blue sand. Never seen that outside of a Picasso.
I don't know if I'd call that blue, honestly. Apparently we're now in Zen, and to get to the tower you're going to have to pass 3 trials before it will let you in, because the security for these big important fantasy things can never be just like a guy checking your ID or a really big gate. It always has to be more esoteric than that. First, you have to kill the Chaos Vortex, and it helpfully just sort of sits there waiting for you to do something, so it's not too difficult. It turns out that the talisman we've been holding on to since Act 2 can just kill this thing in one quick zap, so I don't really know why April didn't do this sooner. She used it to sink a ship and all of its crew before she thought to point it at the big prolapse Metroid. The next trial is a little bit... Okay. YouTube really isn't going to like this because describing this scene involves a lot of use of the A word that YouTube really doesn't like, and I don't fancy having to edit this again if the video gets restricted, so I'll just allude as much as I can to what's going on. Additionally, on the more human side of things, if you aren't comfortable with topics related to a certain A word that rhymes with obtuse, I've put a timestamp here so you can skip it if you like. It'll only take a second, really. Trial 2 is about facing your innermost fears, like a particularly intense episode of Raven. And April's deepest fear is her father. It's been referred to constantly throughout the game that April's father has been, historically not very nice, in the kind of way that usually gets certain protective services called to the house. This scene is quite well done. For a game that has a talking bird and puzzles where you make a guy shit himself, this scene knows what it has to be and it promptly shuts up and plays it straight. The faded backgrounds, the model switching back and forth, the voice changing from a young April to old April, it's all very tastefully done, which is more than I was expecting from The Longest Journey. Subtlety hasn't really been on the cards in this game, so it was good to see them try something heavier. So anyway, here's the fucking cartoon bird again.
Oh, damn, get right, damn, me and my big beak.
This is probably the longest continuous dialogue you have with Crow, and the more this game goes on, the more I think I actually fucking hate this character. I'm not blaming the delivery, the actor is giving it their all, but the writing is like someone writing the one-dimensional fast-talking comic relief by cramming jokes into every sentence whether they work or not. Every joke is a pain to listen to because it's so forced and unnecessary. A good comic relief isn't made by the punchlines, it's made by the downtime between the build-ups. This was an archetype at the time that was hard to escape. You had to have the small, typically non-human and typically celebrity voice marketable plushies. It's as much a product of the time it was made in as it was the writer's failed attempts to make humour feel natural without defaulting to non sequitur and well that just happened type dialogue. The chemistry between these characters is so forced that it doesn't actually feel like they know each other. It feels like they're acting out what the writer thinks will make them look like they know each other. It's the same effect I got from that Castlevania series, which I seem to be in a minority of my dislike of. People seem to really like that show and I don't get it. It's like this dialogue isn't good. It's junk food text meant to fill dead air, and it doesn't need to be filled. Don't be scared to have some quiet now and again. Characters don't need to constantly talk to develop with each other. I do like that immediately after this scene, you essentially make Crow experience ego death. You make him check out underneath the cloud layer, and apparently what's down there is nothing. As in, the kind of nothing that usually comes before a lot of something expanding out very quickly. Beneath this well is apparently such an absence of thing that Crow essentially clipped through the map in reality and had an existential crisis. Either way, you add the magical water to it and get a bridge that looks like you could absolutely clart a fucking Hot Wheels down it, and you've passed the final test. Somehow Halloway is clinging to the bottom of the high charity grav lift even though you never saw him approach. I guess they just wanted to have you do one last confrontation with him at the climax, but this dude is so forgettable that I had to keep stopping to check the previous pages of the script to remember his name. I also don't know if it's just my setup or what, but the atmospheric audio that plays in the background for this room is really hard to listen to. I don't know why, but it's doing something to my ears that my brain don't like.
You? How the hell did you get here?
You didn't think your little games back at the station would fool anyone, did you? Well, aside from those moronic and useless guards.
April isn't the 19th Guardian, as it turns out. I'm assuming because Halloway was made first, so in a kind of Buffy Faith sort of way, the universe sort of said, yeah, that tracks, and kept ticking over. Incidentally, Halloway tries to take the talisman, but the previous Guardian jumps in to rescue you, and if you let him do it, this is how he does it. Just use the magic laser on him, you'll be sweet. Somehow this returns his separate selves into one forms, so now he's just a normal guy and is bizarrely keen to spend 1,000 years strapped to the balance machine, which means April gets a free out. So April just sort of dips. It's melancholic in its weird realism. You finish the big quest and it just sort of ends. Go back to your life, everything's fixed. Like the Wi-Fi outage just got fixed in the office and now you have to get back to work, so everyone just sort of solemnly marches back from their extended coffee break. We do get an epilogue, and if you didn't guess it already, the old woman is April. And based on the way she tells the end of the story, apparently the worlds were eventually reunited anyway, which seems odd since it's the very thing that we just spent the entire game trying to avoid, but okay. I guess they found a workaround. Plus that means that you time travelled earlier. And there's never any indication that the shifts can do that. It's always been between Stark and Arcadia, which appear to exist concurrently, so that's interesting. We still have no context for who these people are, though.
That was such a long, long time ago. And now, Now my story is almost over as well.
You're as healthy as ever. You still got a lot of life left in you. Wish I was half as lucky.
I guess the life expectancy for crows is a lot higher in Arcadia. This game confuses me. On the one hand, it has this sleek, inspired future feel, but at the same time you spend so much of your time there doing Looney Tunes shit. You have folkloric high fantasy and this Brothers Grimm-esque fairy tale theme, but this comes after you've just spent half an hour in a rundown shipyard listening to a voice actor see how many times he can say fuck until it loses all meaning. I'm not going to say that throwing everything you've got into your setting is a bad idea, because sometimes that works. Some of the most inventive worlds in fiction come from an untethered, unhinged need to throw whatever's cool in there, no matter how weird it is. But this doesn't mean that you should just throw shit at the wall to see what sticks. Even the most batshit settings usually have some element of bizarre cohesion. The glue might be hanging on for dear life by one dripping thread, but the glue is there. The Longest Journey feels like it probably spent much of its early life in bullet points. Shotgun paragraphs and footnotes that say, "Wouldn't this be cool?" As a result, it feels disassembled. Like you got all the pieces of the IKEA furniture out of the bags and laid them out neatly, and you got the Allen key in your hand, but you haven't actually put it together yet. The other thing it suffers from is a conflict between the game's length and the size of the world it wants you to get invested in. There isn't enough time to get invested in either Stock or Arcadia since you spend so much time rapidly snapping between them. April has friends she apparently cares for a lot, but you only really see them interact twice, and briefly at that. So when one of them gets shot later, it doesn't really hit as hard as the game thinks it does. There's a lot of lore to this game, but the problem is the fact that it's both not very interesting and is given to you in such a heavy-handed, force-fed way. If you played a fantasy game before, you're probably sick of hearing characters talking about any variation of gems, dragons, prophecies, stones, guardians, old gods, relics, chosen ones, dark wizards, and any and all enchanted objects. And having to listen to characters blast you with unbroken history lessons is hard to follow and kills the pace. The Longest Journey crosses off most of those overused MacGuffins, and other than the added mix of sci-fi and fantasy settings, I don't think there's anything to this game's story that you haven't heard before. I like some generic fantasy, it has its place, but that's usually backed up by gameplay. With an adventure game, the gameplay is often secondary or equal in importance to the story, so if the story is mostly bland, then the game suffers a lot more because of it. I do like this game though. There's some strong performances in it, even if the game's constant attempts to be funny are aggressively grating. These actors do a good job, and if the blooper reel is anything to go by, they seem to have had a good time doing it.
She's enormous. She's fucking huge. You wouldn't fucking believe how fucking huge. The fucking biggest nun you ever seen. Unfucking believable. She's fucking wicked huge. She kicked my ass.
Indeme res templa sans vermine the fuck. Wanna do it again?
Delivery is not an issue, except for maybe Gordon Halloway, where I can't tell what he's saying half the time. The writing is unfortunately the weight tied around this game's ankle. In the entire game, I think there was only one joke that got a nose exhale from me, and that was the argument with the terminal at the start. The funniest part of this game feels unintentional because April is a fucking psychopath, and it was always entertaining to see how much worse she could make a situation solely for her own gain. She takes no prisoners and ruins several people's lives in the name of progression, and then she'll do a diary entry about it. It's great. I think it could stand to benefit a lot if it could shed its 90s irony. It's a product of its time, and I think it hampers it greatly because if it was played straight and with a lot more emphasis on the sincere parts and heavier themes, I think the game's script could have been something great. This game would do well enough to get 2 sequels, so maybe this is something that gets better with time. I'm interested to see. For all my whining, I do like this game. It nails a tone. 2 in fact, and its creativity is admirable and fully realised in the Venice sections. I wish the game could have taken place entirely in Venice. The Arcadia sections actually suffer because it never quite tops the vibes of those first few areas, and I fuck with the jukebox music as well. The majority of the game's score is good, but doesn't stand out too much. It does its job and accentuates the tone, and in all fairness, a less memorable loop can always be a good thing for themes in an adventure game. There is no ceiling to how annoying adventure game music can get. I do like that the game also lets you listen to its unused music tracks in the Book of Secrets as well. Honestly, I prefer the second unused Arcadia track, although admittedly it is too grand for roaming music, so I understand why it was cut. But the jukebox has those prime trip-hop morsels in there that have entered into my regular playlist, and I'm all for it. One of them is even this bizarre mashup made out of a backing track that honestly sounds like some earlier Future Sounds of London stuff.
Last night, at the cafe, right in front of everybody, this creature appeared out of thin air. Just like your forest. It was only there for a few seconds and then it disappeared, but everybody saw it, everybody. The day we met, we clicked instantly. The day we met, we clicked instantly. It was strange, but cool. I like it.
April's voice lines are sampled throughout the whole thing to make up a random mishmash of spoken word to make some impromptu lyrics. Bizarrely, this isn't the first time I've seen a game do this. The other time was that garbage shooter where Mickey Rourke single-handedly fights North Korea. Sometimes my brain doesn't let me think this is real and I have to go back and check I didn't dream it.
Fucking commies keep getting in my way. Well, surprise, motherfuckers. Happy fucking birthday. That's right, Nighty, now you sweet piece of shit. Enjoy the ride, cocksucker. Have a nice trip.
This isn't a secret, by the way, the game plays this during the credits. The Longest Journey commits to what it wants to do, even when it's trying too hard to be funny or dumping a truck's bed worth of lore on you. It's obvious that the people doing it cared. They made their budget stretch as far as they could, and in the end made one of the most successful titles to come out of Norway. Characters might feel odd, but their performance is handled well enough to the point that believability is maintained even if the script is a little lacking. And the game is a surprising champion for equality, giving us gay characters that are handled astonishingly well for 1999. Video games were not a kind medium to marginalised groups in the 90s. Neither were a lot of mediums, to be fair. Adventure games got a bad reputation for a long time, and not all of it was deserved. But what was the medium's fault was its ease of use. If you didn't want to make a complex game with systems and gameplay and 3D maps, the adventure game was an attractive prospect to the lazy developer that just wanted to shit something out. There is no end of dire and unhinged adventure games that came out around this time. Obviously, The Longest Journey isn't one of them. It isn't an adventure game because of a lack of money or an absence of talent, it's an adventure game because it wants to be an adventure game. The genre has merits, and the game understands those and puts its heart into making it. The 90s and 2000s really were a time for people to make some weird, expensive, experimental shit that would somehow find its way into the mainstream whether it wanted to or not. You can still do that now, of course, but there was a special brand of weird going on then that has never quite resurfaced in the same way. And because of that, I think The Longest Journey deserves to be seen. This review is a pain to put out, and if you've made it this far, I want to say an earnest thank you. If you look at the backlog of these videos, you'll see an average time between videos of a year, and that's something I've been trying and failing to fix. For context, between now and the last video, I have moved twice. When I started recording footage for this game, I was sweating my balls off in shorts, and at the time of recording, it's currently fucking snowing outside, so if you stuck around then, I appreciate it. Cheers.
As with sonar, the big problem with detection is interpreting the returning signals. All aircraft carry an electronic gizmo called IFF, Identification Random.
Blow me, baby? Blow me hard, huh?